The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty trail, its golden rays dancing across the parched earth as Vivian Montgomery stumbled forward one last time before her legs finally gave way beneath her. 3 days without proper water, 5 days on the run, and now her body had nothing left to give. As consciousness slipped away, the last thing she saw was a cloud of dust rising in the distance, perhaps salvation, perhaps death. Either way, she no longer had the strength to care. Samuel Reed spotted the crumpled form from a quarter-mile away, the flash of faded blue fabric against the tawny landscape catching his eye as he guided his horse along the old trading route. At first, he thought it might be discarded clothing or perhaps even a dead animal, but something made him slow his mount and approach with caution. The West wasn't kind to the unprepared, and at 28, Sam had learned that lesson well over his years working cattle across the Montana Territory. "Whoa there, Duke," he murmured to his chestnut stallion, pulling back gently on the reins. The horse snorted and shook its head as they drew closer to the unmoving shape. Sam's hand instinctively moved to the Colt revolver on his hip, a necessary precaution in 1876 when the land was still wild and unpredictable. What he found was no threat but a woman young, perhaps 20 or 22. Her face streaked with dirt and her lips cracked from dehydration. Her light brown hair had come loose from what might have once been a neat arrangement, and her traveling dress, though of good quality, was torn and soiled from what appeared to be days on the trail. "Madam," Sam called, dismounting quickly. He knelt beside her still form, relieved to find the faint pulse at her neck. "Madam, can you hear me?" She didn't respond, not even a flutter of her eyelids. Sam looked around, taking in the empty landscape. The nearest town was Clearwater, still a good 15 miles southwest, and his own cabin was about 10 miles in the opposite direction. The woman needed help, and soon. Without hesitation, Sam lifted her as gently as he could. She weighed almost nothing in his arms, concerning him further. He managed to mount Duke while cradling her against his chest, then turned toward home. The town doctor could wait. This woman needed water and shade immediately. "Hang on," he whispered, though he doubted she could hear him. "Just hang on." The journey to his cabin seemed interminable. Sam kept one arm firmly around the woman's waist, her head lolling against his shoulder as Duke picked his way carefully along the familiar trail. He'd never felt so acutely aware of another person's fragility, this stranger whose life now depended on him. When the small log cabin finally came into view, nestled among a stand of pines with a creek running nearby, Sam felt a wave of relief. He'd built the place himself 3 years earlier, when he'd saved enough from his work as a ranch hand to buy this modest parcel of land. It wasn't much, a single room with a stone fireplace, a small stable for Duke, and a garden plot, but it was his, and now it would be this woman's sanctuary. Sam dismounted carefully, carrying the unconscious woman inside and laying her on his bed. He worked quickly, fetching water from the creek, soaking a clean cloth, and gently moistening her parched lips. He dabbed the cool cloth against her forehead and cheeks, washing away the dust of the trail. "Come on now," he urged softly. "Take a little water." At last, she stirred slightly, a small moan escaping her lips. Sam carefully lifted her head, bringing a cup of water to her mouth. "Small sips," he instructed as her eyes fluttered open, revealing irises the color of polished amber. Vivian felt as though she were swimming up from the bottom of a deep well. Consciousness returned in fragments, the sensation of being moved, the rhythm of a horse's gait, and now the press of a cool cloth against her skin and the blessed relief of water on her lips. She tried to speak but managed only a raspy whisper. "Easy now," said a deep voice that sounded like it belonged to the cool hand supporting her head. "You're safe. Take it slow." Vivian blinked, trying to focus on the face above her. A man younger than she'd expected from the voice, with sun-bronzed skin, dark hair that curled slightly where it touched his collar, and eyes the clear blue of a winter sky. A stranger's face, yet somehow not threatening. Still, panic flared in her chest. Where, she managed before a coughing fit overtook her. "You're at my cabin, about 10 miles northeast of Clearwater," the man explained, offering more water. "I found you collapsed on the trail. Been out there a while, from the looks of it." Memory returned in a rush, the desperate flight from Denver. The stagecoach that had left her behind at the last stop when she couldn't pay for the remaining journey. The days of walking with dwindling supplies. And before that, the reason she'd fled in the first place. "Thank you," she whispered when she could speak again. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." "Name's Samuel Reed," he said. "Most folks call me Sam." "Vivian Montgomery," she replied, then immediately regretted revealing her real name. Old habits died hard, even when one was at their weakest. "Well, Miss Montgomery, you need rest and nourishment. I've got some stew on the stove. Think you could manage a few spoonfuls?" The mention of food made her stomach clench painfully. How long had it been since she'd eaten properly? I believe I could try." Sam nodded, seeming pleased. He helped her sit up against the pillows, and Vivian realized she was in his bed, the only bed in the one-room cabin, from what she could see. A small table with 2 chairs stood near the fireplace. Shelves with provisions lined one wall, and a trunk presumably containing his belongings sat at the foot of the bed. Simple but neat and orderly. "It's not much," Sam said, noting her gaze as he ladled stew into a bowl. "But it keeps the rain off and the wolves out." "It's lovely," Vivian said sincerely. After what she'd been through, this humble cabin seemed like a palace. Sam brought the stew and helped her hold the spoon when her hands trembled too much to manage alone. The simple act of being cared for brought unexpected tears to her eyes, which she blinked away quickly. "Sorry," she murmured. "I'm not usually so." "No need for apologies here," Sam interrupted gently. "The trail takes a lot out of a person. I've seen strong men brought low by less." Vivian ate slowly, savoring each bite of the hearty stew. Sam moved about the cabin, tending to chores and occasionally checking on her, but not pressing for explanations. His quiet, undemanding presence was strangely comforting. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the cabin's single window, exhaustion pulled at Vivian once more. Sam noticed her eyelids drooping and took the empty bowl. "Rest now," he said. "We can talk more tomorrow if you're feeling up to it." "But where will you sleep?" Vivian asked, suddenly aware she was occupying his only bed. Sam gestured to a bedroll near the fireplace. "I've slept under the stars plenty of times. This is a luxury by comparison." "I can't take your bed." "Yes, you can," he said firmly. "And you will, at least until you've got your strength back." Too weak to argue further, Vivian surrendered to sleep, wondering at the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this place, to this man who asked nothing of her yet had already given so much. Sam watched as she drifted off, her breathing evening out into the rhythm of deep sleep. He stoked the fire, preparing for the cooler night ahead, and wondered about the woman in his bed. She spoke like someone educated, and despite her current state, there was a refinement about her that suggested she hadn't always lived a hard life. What had driven her to the point of collapse on a lonely road in Montana territory? Whatever her story, it wasn't his place to pry. The West was full of people running from something, himself included. Everyone deserved the chance to start fresh without the weight of the past hanging over them. As he settled onto his bedroll, Sam found himself strangely content despite the unexpected turn his day had taken. There was something about Vivian Montgomery that intrigued him, something beyond her obvious beauty. Perhaps it was the flash of determination he'd seen in those amber eyes, even in her weakened state. Whatever it was, He had a feeling his life had just changed in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Morning came with the gentle chorus of birdsong and the warm glow of sunlight streaming through the cabin window. Vivian woke slowly, momentarily disoriented until the events of the previous day came flooding back. She was in Samuel Reed's cabin, alive thanks to his intervention. She pushed herself up to sitting, pleased to find her arms steadier than they had been. Looking around, she saw Sam by the fireplace, his back to her as he tended to something cooking in a cast-iron skillet. The domestic scene struck her as oddly peaceful, so different from the chaos that had defined her recent existence. "Good morning," she said, her voice still rough but stronger than yesterday. Sam turned, a smile lighting his features. "Morning. How are you feeling?" "Better, thanks to you." It was true. Though still weak, the water, food, and rest had worked wonders. "I don't know how to repay your kindness." "No need for repayment," Sam replied, bringing over a tin mug of coffee. "Anyone would have done the same." Vivian accepted the coffee gratefully. "I'm not so sure about that. There are plenty in this world who'd have ridden right past. Or worse." Sam's expression darkened momentarily. "True enough. The territory has its share of predators, both animal and human. You're lucky it was me who found you and not someone else." The statement hung between them, heavy with implications. Vivian sipped her coffee, gathering courage for what she needed to ask. "Mr. Reed, Sam, please." "Sam," she amended with a small smile. "I need to get to Clearwater. Is there any chance you might be headed that way soon?" He studied her for a moment. "I wasn't planning on it, but I could take you tomorrow if you're feeling strong enough." "May I ask what's waiting for you there?" Vivian hesitated. The truth was nothing awaited her in Clearwater except the hope of anonymity and a fresh start. After fleeing Denver with little more than the clothes on her back and what money she could gather quickly, she'd chosen the small Montana town almost at random, somewhere Victor Hargrove's influence wouldn't reach. "A new beginning," she said finally, deciding on a version of the truth. "I'm hoping to find work there." "What kind of work?" Sam asked, turning back to the fireplace to retrieve the skillet filled with fragrant bacon and eggs. "I was a teacher back east," she replied. This, at least, was completely true. "But I'd take whatever's available. I'm not afraid of hard work." Sam nodded thoughtfully as he served breakfast. "Clearwater's growing. They might need a teacher. Town's got maybe 300 souls now, including the outlying farms. Sawmill brings in steady work, and there's talk of the railroad coming through in a year or two." "You know it well, then?" "Well enough. I sell beef to the hotel there, and sometimes break horses for the livery." He sat across from her at the small table. "Been in these parts about 5 years now." "And before that?" Vivian asked, genuinely curious about this quiet, competent man. A shadow crossed Sam's face. "Missouri. Left after the war. Like you said, a new beginning." Vivian recognized the reluctance to elaborate and didn't press further. They ate in companionable silence, and she was pleased to find her appetite returning. When they finished, she insisted on helping wash the dishes despite Sam's protests. "I may be recovering, but I'm not an invalid," she said firmly, taking a plate from his hands. "Besides, I've been taking advantage of your hospitality. The least I can do is help with the chores." Sam relented with a chuckle. "You're stubborn, Miss Montgomery." "Vivian, please." "And yes, I am. My father always said it was my least attractive quality." "Your father was wrong," Sam said simply, then looked almost surprised at his own words. A faint flush colored his cheeks as he turned away to put the remaining food in the larder. Vivian felt a curious warmth bloom in her chest at his words. It had been so long since anyone had seen her stubbornness as anything but a flaw to be corrected. Victor had certainly tried his best to break her of it. first with honeyed words and later with methods far less gentle. The thought of Victor sobered her immediately. She couldn't afford to feel safe yet, not when she knew what he was capable of. For all she knew, he had already sent men to find her. "Is something wrong?" Sam asked, noticing her sudden change in demeanor. Vivian forced a smile. "Just tired still. Perhaps I should rest a bit more before attempting the journey tomorrow." Sam nodded, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "That's wise. I need to check my fence line and tend to the animals. Will you be all right here alone for a few hours?" "Of course," Vivian assured him. "I've imposed enough without keeping you from your work." After Sam departed, Vivian rested but found sleep elusive. Her mind kept returning to the predicament she faced. She had very little money left, not enough to establish herself in Clearwater or anywhere else. Her teaching credentials were back in Denver, along with everything else she'd been forced to leave behind. What would she do once Sam delivered her to town? How would she survive? By the time Sam returned in the afternoon, Vivian had worked herself into a state of quiet anxiety. He noticed immediately as he hung his hat by the door. "You look troubled," he observed, pouring water from the pitcher into the wash basin to clean the day's dust from his hands and face. Vivian hesitated, then decided honesty, or at least partial honesty, was her best course. "I'm concerned about my prospects in Clearwater. I left rather hastily, and I find myself with limited resources." Sam dried his hands on a towel, considering her words. "Running from something?" The directness of the question startled her. "What makes you say that?" "People don't end up collapsed on remote trails unless they're running toward something important or away from something worse," he said simply. "And you don't strike me as the gold-seeking type." Vivian looked down at her hands, twisting in her lap. "You're very perceptive." "Not particularly. Just seen it before." He sat in the chair opposite her. "Look, you don't have to tell me anything. Your business is your own. But if you're in some kind of trouble—" "I'm not a criminal, if that's what you're asking," Vivian said quickly. "Never thought you were," Sam replied. "But there are other kinds of trouble." The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. How long had it been since someone had offered help without demanding something in return? Vivian found herself wanting to trust this man, despite the hard lessons of recent years. "I was engaged," she began cautiously, "to a man in Denver, a man of influence and means. When I discovered certain things about his character and tried to break the engagement, he made it clear he wouldn't accept my decision." Sam's expression hardened. "He hurt you?" "Not at first," Vivian admitted. "At first it was just threats, subtle ones, wrapped in concern and affection. But when I persisted, She faltered, the memory still too raw. "Let's just say I realized my life would be in danger if I stayed. So you ran." "So I ran," she confirmed. "With little planning and even less preparation, as you saw from my condition when you found me." Sam was quiet for a long moment, digesting her story. Finally, he asked, "Do you think he'll come looking for you?" The question sent a chill through Vivian. "I don't know. He has business interests that keep him in Denver, but he's not a man accustomed to losing what he considers his. And he has associates in many places." "What's his name?" Sam's voice was carefully neutral. "I'd rather not say," Vivian replied. The less Sam knew about Victor, the safer he would be. "It's better if you don't get involved more than you already are." "I became involved the moment I found you on that trail," Sam pointed out. "But I'll respect your privacy. Just know that if trouble follows you to my door, I'm not one to back down from a fight." The protective declaration touched Vivian deeply, even as it worried her. She couldn't bear the thought of bringing danger to this good man's door. "Thank you, but I've imposed enough," Once we reach Clearwater tomorrow, you'll be free of any obligation to me." Sam looked as though he wanted to say more, but instead nodded and rose to prepare their evening meal. They ate together, the conversation turning to lighter topics, Sam telling stories of the local wildlife and the changing seasons in Montana, Vivian sharing anecdotes from her teaching days, carefully edited to reveal nothing of her specific past. As night fell, Vivian once again took Sam's bed despite her protests, and he settled on his bedroll near the fire. She lay awake long after his breathing had deepened into sleep, staring at the rough-hewn ceiling beams and wondering what awaited her in Clearwater. Whatever it was, she would face it alone, as she'd faced everything since leaving her family's home in Boston 5 years earlier to pursue her teaching career. The thought brought both determination and a curious sense of loss. In just one day, Samuel Reed had become more than a rescuer, he'd become a friend, perhaps the first true friend she'd had in years. Tomorrow she would walk away from that friendship for his sake as much as for hers. With that melancholy resolution, Vivian finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, unaware that fate had other plans for her future. The journey to Clearwater the next morning began with a golden sunrise that painted the rolling landscape in hues of amber and bronze. Sam had fashioned a more comfortable seat for Vivian on Duke's back, insisting she ride while he walked alongside, leading the horse. Despite her improving strength, he wouldn't hear of her walking the 10 miles to town. "I make this trip regularly," he assured her. "Duke and I can handle it just fine." Vivian had finally acquiesced, though she felt guilty watching Sam's steady stride beside the horse while she rode in relative comfort. They traveled at an unhurried pace, and Sam pointed out landmarks along the way, a distinctive rock formation, a bend in the creek where he often fished, the distant smudge of smoke that marked the location of the Clearwater sawmill. As they drew closer to town, Vivian's anxiety increased. What would she do once they arrived? Where would she stay? Her remaining funds might cover a night or two at the hotel, but after that. "Penny for your thoughts," Sam said, glancing up at her troubled expression. "Just wondering about accommodations in town," she admitted. "Is there a boarding house as well as the hotel?" "Mrs. Holloway runs a respectable place for single ladies," Sam replied. "Cheaper than the hotel, though I hear her rules are strict and her breakfast porridge is terrible." This startled a laugh from Vivian. "I suppose I can endure bad porridge if the price is right." They crested a small rise, and Clearwater came into view in the valley below, a collection of wooden buildings along a main street, with homes and businesses scattered around it like leaves blown by the wind. It wasn't large by Eastern standards, but it was bigger than Vivian had expected, with a proper church steeple rising above the other structures and several commercial establishments visible even from a distance. "It's larger than I imagined," she remarked. "Growing every year," Sam agreed. "That's the hotel at the far end with the green trim. Mrs. Holloway's place is the 2-story White House just past the general store." As they continued their approach, Vivian noticed a commotion near the edge of town, a crowd gathering around what appeared to be a stagecoach that had stopped at an odd angle halfway off the road. "That's unusual," Sam commented, frowning. "The stage isn't due until tomorrow." As they drew closer, they could see that one of the coach's wheels had broken, forcing it to halt. Passengers and luggage were being offloaded while the driver and another man examined the damage. "Looks like they'll be delayed a while," Sam observed. "That won't be a quick fix." Vivian nodded absently, her attention drawn to one of the passengers, a tall man in an expensive suit who stood apart from the others, speaking intently to another well-dressed individual. Something about his posture, the authoritative way he gestured, sent alarm bells ringing in her mind. When the man turned, scanning the surroundings with obvious irritation, Vivian's blood ran cold. Even at this distance, she recognized him immediately: James Forrester, Victor's business partner and closest friend. If James was here, it could only mean one thing. They were looking for her. Panic seized her, making it difficult to breathe. She clutched the saddle horn tightly, her knuckles whitening. "Vivian?" Sam's concerned voice seemed to come from far away. "What's wrong?" She couldn't speak, couldn't tear her eyes away from the figure of James Forrester, who was now directing what appeared to be questions to a local man. The local pointed toward town, nodding, and James reached into his jacket, likely for money to reward the information. "We need to go," Vivian finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, Sam, we can't go into town. Not now." Sam looked from her terrified face to the scene by the stagecoach, his expression sharpening with understanding. "Is that him? The man you're running from?" "No, but close enough," she replied. "His partner. Please, can we turn back?" Without hesitation, Sam pivoted Duke around and led the horse away from the road, toward a stand of trees that would shield them from view. Once they were safely concealed, he looked up at Vivian, his blue eyes intense. "Tell me what's happening," he said. "All of it this time." Vivian closed her eyes briefly, gathering her courage. "His name is Victor Hargrove. He owns half of Denver, or so it seems, mines, banks, properties. James Forrester is his business partner and the only person Victor truly trusts. If James is here, Victor sent him, which means they're searching for me. But how would they know to look in Clearwater? It's not exactly on the main route west. I purchased a stagecoach ticket to Helena but couldn't afford the full journey. Clearwater was the last stop I could pay for." Vivian's hands trembled as she twisted them in her lap. They must have traced the ticket purchase. Sam's expression was grim. "What will they do if they find you?" "Force me back to Denver," Vivian said quietly. "Victor made it clear that our engagement would proceed whether I wished it or not. He has judges in his pocket, lawmen on his payroll. Once I'm back under his control." She couldn't finish the thought. "That's not going to happen," Sam said with such conviction that Vivian almost believed him. "We'll go back to my cabin for now. Figure out next steps from there." Relief flooded through her. "I can't ask you to get involved in this, Sam. These men are dangerous." "You're not asking. I'm offering." His jaw was set in a determined line. "Besides, I've dealt with dangerous men before." The return journey to Sam's cabin was tense and hurried, both of them scanning the trail behind them frequently for signs of pursuit. By the time they arrived, the afternoon was waning, and Vivian was exhausted from the emotional strain as much as the physical exertion. Sam helped her down from Duke, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "You're safe here," he assured her. "My nearest neighbor is 5 miles away, and few people even know this place exists." Inside the cabin, Vivian sank into a chair, the reality of her situation crashing down upon her. "What am I going to do?" she whispered, more to herself than to Sam. "I can't keep running forever." Sam busied himself starting a fire, his movements efficient but his mind clearly working through their predicament. "How much do you know about Hargrove's operations?" he asked after a moment. The question caught Vivian by surprise. "What do you mean?" "His businesses, his associates, his methods. You were close to him, engaged to be married. You must have seen or heard things." "I suppose I did," Vivian said slowly, thinking back. "Victor wasn't particularly careful about what he discussed in my presence, especially after we became engaged. He seemed to enjoy explaining his various ventures, though I suspect he simplified matters for what he considered my feminine understanding." Sam snorted at that. "His mistake. What did you learn?" "That many of his businesses operate in gray areas of the law, if not outright illegality," Vivian replied. "He has interests in several mines where safety is sacrificed for profit. His banks charge exorbitant rates to desperate people, and there are warehouses along the river." She hesitated, remembering conversations she'd overheard between Victor and James. "Go on," Sam encouraged, sitting across from her now, his expression intent. "They import goods from the East, but I don't believe all of them pass through proper customs or taxation. And there were ledgers, 2 sets of them. One for the official records and another that James kept locked in his office safe." Sam nodded thoughtfully. "Sounds like our Mr. Hargrove has secrets that might interest federal authorities." Understanding dawned on Vivian. "You think I could use what I know as leverage to keep him away?" "It's worth considering," Sam said. "Men like that fear exposure more than anything. Their power depends on maintaining a respectable facade." Hope flickered to life in Vivian's chest, but quickly dimmed. "But how would I even approach such a thing? I have no proof, just things I've seen and heard. My word against theirs." "Maybe not just your word," Sam said enigmatically. He rose and went to the trunk at the foot of his bed, unlocking it with a key he kept on a leather cord around his neck. From within, he withdrew a small metal box, which he brought to the table. Inside was a folded document and a silver badge that glinted in the firelight. Vivian stared at it in confusion, then looked up at Sam's face. "United States Marshal," she read from the badge. "You're a lawman?" "Not exactly," Sam said, unfolding the document. "Special deputy, assigned to investigate certain businesses suspected of evading federal taxation and engaging in interstate commerce violations. I've been working undercover in this region for nearly 2 years. Vivian sat back, stunned. "You're not really a rancher?" "I am a rancher," Sam corrected with a small smile. "The best covers are the ones built on truth. I grew up on a cattle farm in Missouri, served in the war, and learned to break horses from my grandfather. All true. What's also true is that I work for Judge William Reynolds out of Helena, gathering evidence against men who think themselves above the law. And Victor Hargrove is one of these men. His name has come up in our investigations," Sam confirmed, "particularly regarding those untaxed imports you mentioned and some questionable mining practices. But Denver is outside my jurisdiction, and we've had trouble connecting him directly to the operations in Montana Territory." Vivian's mind raced with this new information. "So you believe what I know could be useful to your investigation?" "Potentially, yes." Sam leaned forward, his expression earnest. "But I want to be clear, I'm not asking you to help with my case as a condition of my protection. You're safe here regardless. This is simply an option to consider, a way you might permanently solve your Victor Hargrove problem." The sincerity in his voice touched Vivian deeply. Even now, when she could potentially help his official duties, he was putting her well-being first. It was so far removed from Victor's manipulations that tears threatened to form in her eyes. "I want to help," she said firmly. "Not just for my sake, but because what Victor does hurts people. I've seen the consequences: miners with crushed limbs discarded without compensation, families evicted from their homes when they couldn't meet his exorbitant loan terms. If there's a chance to stop him, I want to take it." Sam's expression softened with something that looked like admiration. "You're a remarkable woman, Vivian Montgomery." The compliment warmed her from within. "I'm just doing what's right." "Many wouldn't," Sam pointed out. "Many would simply run as far as possible and never look back." "I tried that," Vivian reminded him with a wry smile. "It didn't work out so well." Sam chuckled, then grew serious again. "We need to be careful. Forrester's presence in Clearwater means they're close on your trail. I need to get word to Judge Reynolds without alerting Hargrove's men that we're communicating with authorities." "How will you manage that?" "I have a contact in town, Benjamin Walker, the telegraph operator. He sends messages for me in code when needed." Sam glanced out the window at the setting sun. "I'll ride in after dark, when there's less chance of being spotted." "You're going tonight?" Vivian couldn't keep the anxiety from her voice. The thought of being alone in the cabin, not knowing if James Forrester might have somehow tracked them here, was terrifying. Sam seemed to read her thoughts. "I won't leave you unprotected," he assured her. "I have a shotgun you can keep close, though I doubt anyone will find this place. And I'll be back before dawn." Vivian nodded, trying to project more confidence than she felt. "I'll be fine. Do what you need to do." Sam prepared for his nocturnal journey, showing Vivian how to operate the shotgun and securing the cabin as best he could. Before he left, he hesitated by the door, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "I'll return as quickly as possible," he promised. "Try to get some rest." Then he was gone, melting into the darkness like a shadow. Vivian bolted the door behind him, the shotgun heavy in her hands as she moved to sit by the fire. The night stretched ahead, long and uncertain, but for the first time since fleeing Denver, she felt a glimmer of something beyond fear, a spark of hope that perhaps her nightmare might eventually end. The night passed with excruciating slowness. Every creak of the cabin's timbers, every rustle of wind through the nearby trees set Vivian's nerves on edge. She dozed fitfully in the chair by the fire, the shotgun never far from her grasp, and startled awake at the slightest sound. When the first pale light of dawn began to filter through the cabin's single window, Vivian rose stiffly from her vigil and peered outside. The surrounding forest was peaceful in the early morning hush, with no sign of either danger or Sam's return. She stoked the fire and put coffee on to boil, needing the routine task to settle her growing anxiety. Just as the coffee began to bubble, she heard the distinctive sound of hoofbeats approaching. Vivian grabbed the shotgun, her heart racing as she positioned herself to the side of the window where she could see but not be easily spotted. Relief flooded through her as Sam came into view, Duke moving at a steady trot despite what must have been a long night's journey. Vivian quickly unbolted the door and stepped onto the small porch, the shotgun lowered but still in her hands. Sam dismounted wearily, leading Duke toward the small stable. When he spotted Vivian, a tired smile crossed his features. "Good morning. I see you managed without me." "Barely," she admitted, following him to help with the horse. "Did you reach your contact?" "I did." Sam removed Duke's saddle, his movements practiced despite his obvious fatigue. "Message is on its way to Judge Reynolds. I also made some inquiries about our visitors." "And?" Vivian prompted when he didn't immediately continue. "Forrester checked into the hotel yesterday afternoon. He's been asking questions all over town discreetly, but thoroughly. Described you perfectly to the stagecoach agent." Sam brushed Duke down with steady strokes. "He's traveling with two men who look more hired muscle than business associates." Vivian's stomach tightened with fear. "Do you think they'll search beyond the town?" "Eventually, yes. But for now, they seem focused on Clearwater itself and the trail north toward Helena." Sam finished with Duke and turned to face her fully. "We have some time, but not much. Judge Reynolds will need at least a week to arrange for federal agents to take your statement and build a case." "A week?" Vivian echoed, dismayed. "Can we remain hidden that long?" "We'll have to," Sam said simply. He led the way back to the cabin, where Vivian poured them both coffee. He accepted the mug gratefully, the dark circles under his eyes testament to his sleepless night. "You should rest," Vivian urged. "I'll keep watch." Sam looked as though he might argue, but exhaustion won out. "Wake me if anything seems amiss," he instructed, settling onto his bedroll near the dying fire. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened into sleep. Vivian watched him for a moment, struck by the trust he'd placed in her. This man, who'd known her barely 3 days, had risked his safety and his mission to protect her. The realization stirred something warm in her chest, something she was increasingly unable to ignore. The day passed quietly. Vivian busied herself with small tasks around the cabin, mending a tear in her dress, preparing a simple stew for when Sam woke, keeping watch at the window. By late afternoon, Sam stirred, looking more rested though still weary around the edges. "You should have woken me sooner," he said, accepting the bowl of stew she offered. "You needed the sleep," Vivian replied simply. "Nothing has happened." They ate together as the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the cabin floor. Sam explained what would happen when Judge Reynolds received his message. Agents would be dispatched, likely traveling discreetly to avoid alerting Hargrove's men. They would meet at a predetermined location to take Vivian's formal statement, and then move quickly to secure evidence based on her information before Hargrove could destroy anything incriminating. "And after that?" Vivian asked, the question that had been haunting her finally surfacing. "What happens to me once I've given my statement?" Sam hesitated, setting down his spoon. "That depends on how the case develops. You might need to testify eventually, though the judge will try to build the case without requiring that. Witness protection could be arranged if necessary." "Witness protection?" Vivian repeated the unfamiliar term. "What does that entail?" "A new location, possibly a new identity. Federal marshals would ensure your safety until the threat is neutralized." Sam's expression was carefully neutral, but something flickered in his eyes, regret, perhaps, or resignation. "I see." Vivian looked down at her half-eaten stew, no longer hungry. The prospect of starting over yet again, alone in some unknown place, felt hollow despite the promise of safety it offered. "It's one option," Sam said after a moment. "Not the only one." Before Vivian could ask what he meant, a sound outside caught their attention, the distant but unmistakable approach of riders. Sam was on his feet instantly, moving to the window with the fluid grace of a man accustomed to danger. "3 riders," he reported, his voice tense. "Coming up the main trail." Fear surged through Vivian. "Forrester? Can't tell yet." Sam moved quickly to retrieve his rifle from above the fireplace. "But we need to assume the worst. Gather only what's essential. We're leaving out the back way." Vivian didn't question him, rushing to collect her few belongings as Sam extinguished the fire and gathered ammunition. Within minutes, they slipped out through a rear door Vivian hadn't even noticed before, hidden behind a storage shelf. Sam led her quickly through the trees behind the cabin toward a small ravine. Duke was already there, apparently brought around earlier as a precaution. Sam helped Vivian mount, then swung up behind her, his body warm and solid against her back. "There's an old trapper's cabin about 6 miles east," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear as he guided Duke up the ravine. "We can shelter there while I figure out our next move." They rode in tense silence, the horse picking its way carefully through the growing darkness. Vivian was acutely aware of Sam's arm around her waist, holding her securely as they navigated the rough terrain. Despite the danger of their situation, she found herself drawing strength and comfort from his nearness. When they finally reached the trapper's cabin, little more than a crude shelter with a dirt floor and a stone fireplace, night had fully fallen. Sam helped Vivian dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "I need to go back and observe," he said quietly. "See if it's really Forrester and what they're doing at my place." "That's too dangerous," Vivian protested, gripping his arm. "What if they see you?" "I'll be careful," Sam assured her. "But we need to know what we're dealing with. I won't be long." Before she could argue further, he squeezed her hand and disappeared into the darkness, leaving Vivian alone with her fears. The trapper's cabin was cold and uninviting, with only a thin shaft of moonlight penetrating its single small window. Vivian wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders and settled in to wait, praying for Sam's safe return. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. Vivian paced the small confines of the cabin, her mind conjuring increasingly terrifying scenarios of Sam's capture or worse. When she finally heard footsteps approaching, she pressed herself against the wall beside the door, a heavy branch she'd found serving as her only weapon. "It's me," came Sam's voice, low and reassuring. Vivian sagged with relief as he entered, his expression grim in the moonlight that illuminated his features. "It was Forrester," he confirmed, closing the door quietly behind him. "Him and 2 others, just as I feared. They searched the cabin thoroughly." "Did they find anything?" Vivian asked anxiously. "Anything that might tell them about your real work or about me?" Sam shook his head. "I keep nothing incriminating there. But they know someone's been staying with me, 2 coffee cups by the fire, your hairpin on the table. They were still there when I left, settling in as if they planned to wait for our return." "What do we do now?" Vivian whispered, the reality of their situation sinking in. They were effectively trapped, unable to return to the relative safety of Sam's cabin, with Forrester and his men between them and Clearwater. "We head north," Sam decided. "There's a small settlement called Pine Creek about 20 miles from here. My friend Daniel Miller has a ranch there. He's helped with my investigations before. We can trust him." 20 miles, Vivian echoed, thinking of the difficult journey ahead. "Will Duke be able to carry us both that far?" "We'll alternate riding and walking," Sam said. "It'll take most of tomorrow, but we can make it by nightfall if we start at first light." He moved to the fireplace, arranging some small sticks for a tiny fire, just enough to take the edge off the night's chill without producing smoke that might be spotted. As the meager flames cast dancing shadows around the cabin, Vivian studied Sam's profile, struck by the determination etched in his features. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I've brought nothing but trouble to your door." Sam looked up, surprise evident in his expression. "You have nothing to apologize for, Vivian. None of this is your fault. But your home, your work, are less important than your safety," he interrupted firmly. "Besides, this isn't the first time my cover has been threatened. It won't be the last." His casual acceptance of the danger faced in his line of work both impressed and concerned Vivian. "How do you do it?" she asked. "Live with this constant risk, never knowing when your true identity might be discovered?" Sam was quiet for a moment, poking at the small fire with a stick. "I believe in what I'm doing," he said finally. "After the war, I saw too many men with power taking advantage of the chaos, building fortunes on others' suffering. When Judge Reynolds approached me about this work, it felt like a chance to restore some balance." "That's admirable," Vivian said sincerely. Sam shrugged, looking almost embarrassed by her praise. "It's just the right thing to do. Same as helping a woman collapsed on the roadside." The reference to their first meeting brought a small smile to Vivian's lips. "I still don't know how to thank you for that." "Live your life free of Victor Hargrove," Sam replied, his blue eyes intent on hers across the fire. "That'll be thanks enough." Something in his gaze made Vivian's heart beat faster. The tiny cabin suddenly seemed smaller, the space between them charged with unspoken emotions. Vivian looked away first, uncertain of the feelings stirring within her and afraid of misinterpreting the moment. "We should try to rest," she suggested, her voice not quite steady. "Tomorrow will be challenging." Sam nodded, arranging his coat as a makeshift pillow for her near the fire. "Take this spot. It's warmer." "What about you?" Vivian asked, though she gratefully settled onto the offered space. "I'll keep watch for a while," Sam said, moving to sit with his back against the cabin wall, rifle across his knees. Old habits. Despite her exhaustion, Vivian found sleep elusive, her mind too full of the day's events and the uncertain future that awaited them. She watched through half-closed eyes as Sam maintained his vigil, his profile strong and reassuring in the dying firelight. Eventually, fatigue overcame anxiety, and she drifted into a fitful sleep, dreaming of endless trails and pursuing shadows. Dawn broke with a gentle rain pattering against the cabin's roof. Vivian woke to find Sam already preparing for their journey, packing the few supplies they had and checking his weapons. He offered her jerky and a small biscuit from his saddlebag, not much of a breakfast, but better than nothing. "The rain is both good and bad," Sam explained as they ate. "Good because it'll make our tracks harder to follow. Bad because it'll make the journey more difficult." Vivian nodded, gathering her resolve for the day ahead. "I'm ready whenever you are." They set out as the rain lightened to a misty drizzle, Sam leading Duke through the wet undergrowth with Vivian riding. As promised, they alternated throughout the morning, switching positions every hour or so to spare the horse and maintain their pace. The terrain grew increasingly rugged as they moved north, skirting the edges of hills and following game trails, when possible to avoid leaving obvious signs of their passage. By midday, they had covered perhaps 8 miles, and both were soaked and chilled despite their efforts to stay under the tree cover. "There's a hunter's lean to just ahead," Sam said as they paused for a brief rest. "We can stop there to dry out a bit and eat something more substantial." The lean-to proved to be little more than a slanted roof of pine branches supported by a rock face, but it offered welcome shelter from the persistent drizzle. Sam quickly built a small, nearly smokeless fire while Vivian wrung water from her sodden skirts as best she could. As they huddled near the tiny flames, sharing the last of Sam's biscuits and some dried apples, Vivian found herself studying his face, the strong line of his jaw, the small scar near his right temple, the way his dark hair curled damply against his neck. There was something profoundly comforting about his presence, a steady reliability that made her feel safe despite their precarious situation. "What?" Sam asked, catching her gaze. Vivian flushed, embarrassed to be caught staring. "I was just thinking how fortunate I am that it was you who found me on that road." "I'd call it providence rather than fortune," Sam replied with a small smile. "I rarely take that particular trail. Was heading to check on a neighbor's cattle as a favor." "Providence, then," Vivian agreed, returning his smile. "Either way, I'm grateful." Sam's expression softened. "As am I. Finding you has been." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "Unexpected, but not unwelcome." The simple admission warmed Vivian more effectively than the small fire. Before she could respond, however, Sam tensed, his head turning sharply toward the forest behind them. "What is it?" Vivian whispered, instantly alert. "Not sure," Sam murmured, reaching slowly for his rifle. "Thought I heard something. Stay here." He moved silently to the edge of their shelter, peering into the misty forest with the practiced eye of a hunter. Long moments passed as he scanned the surrounding trees, his body taut with readiness. Finally, he relaxed slightly. "Probably just a deer, but we should move on. We've been here long enough." They extinguished the fire and continued their journey, more cautious now, pausing frequently to listen for sounds of pursuit. The rain eventually stopped, but the forest remained wet and dripping, making progress slow as they navigated slippery slopes and muddy depressions. By late afternoon, exhaustion was taking its toll on both of them. Vivian's muscles ached from the alternating periods of riding and walking through difficult terrain, and she could see fatigue etched in the set of Sam's shoulders as he led Duke up yet another incline. "How much further?" she asked as they crested the hill, trying to keep the weariness from her voice. "Another 4 miles, maybe 5, Sam replied, gesturing toward a distant ridge. "Pine Creek is just beyond those hills. We should reach Daniel's ranch by nightfall if we keep moving." Vivian nodded determinedly, though the prospect of several more hours of travel seemed daunting. They had just started down the other side of the hill when a sharp crack echoed through the trees, the unmistakable sound of a rifle shot. Sam reacted instantly, pulling Vivian from Duke's back and pushing her down behind a fallen log. "Stay down," he ordered, positioning himself beside her with his rifle ready. "Was that—" "Yes," Sam confirmed grimly. "They've found us." Another shot rang out, splintering bark from a tree several yards to their right. Sam peered carefully over the log, trying to pinpoint the shooter's location. "I count 2 of them," he murmured. "About 100 yards back, using the trees for cover. Can't see if Forrester is with them." Vivian's heart hammered in her chest, fear threatening to overwhelm her. "What do we do?" "We need to move," Sam decided. "They have the advantage at this distance. There's thicker cover down the hill. If we can reach it, we might be able to lose them in the undergrowth." He whistled softly, and Duke, who had trotted a short distance away when the shooting started, returned to them, head low as if sensing the danger. Sam quickly removed his saddlebags and rifle scabbard. "When I give the word, run straight down the hill toward that cluster of pines," he instructed, checking his rifle. "Don't stop, don't look back. I'll be right behind you." Vivian nodded, her mouth too dry for speech. Sam counted down quietly, and then shouted, "Now!" Vivian ran, her skirts hitched up around her knees, her boots slipping on the wet leaves and pine needles that covered the forest floor. Behind her, she heard Sam fire several shots, covering fire to keep their pursuers' heads down. The sound of gunfire seemed to come from all around as she raced toward the promised shelter of the dense pines. She was perhaps 20 yards from the tree line when her foot caught on an exposed root, sending her tumbling painfully down the remainder of the slope. She came to rest at the base of a large pine, momentarily stunned by the fall. "Vivian!" Sam's voice cut through her daze. He was beside her in an instant, helping her to her feet. "Are you hurt?" "Just bruised," she managed, wincing as she put weight on her right ankle. "I can walk." Sam looked unconvinced but had no time to argue as a bullet thudded into the trunk of the pine above their heads. He pulled her deeper into the forest, moving as quickly as her injured ankle would allow. They pushed through the dense undergrowth, the sounds of pursuit growing louder behind them. Vivian bit her lip against the pain in her ankle, determined not to slow them down. Sam kept one arm around her waist, supporting her while scanning constantly for danger. The trees began to thin, and ahead Vivian could see open ground, a wide meadow stretching perhaps half a mile to another forest edge. Her heart sank at the sight. They would be completely exposed crossing such open terrain. Sam saw it too and cursed under his breath. "We can't go back and we can't stay here," he muttered, more to himself than to Vivian. "They'll have us surrounded soon." "What about the meadow?" Vivian asked. "Could we make it across?" "Not without being seen," Sam replied. "And you're in no condition to run that distance." A shout from behind them indicated their pursuers were closing in. Sam made a quick decision, guiding Vivian to a dense thicket of undergrowth. "Stay here," he said, helping her down into the concealing foliage. "No matter what happens, no matter what you hear, don't move until I come back for you." "What are you going to do?" Vivian asked, gripping his arm in sudden fear. "Create a diversion," Sam replied, his expression grim but determined. "Lead them away from you." "No," Vivian protested. "It's too dangerous. They'll kill you." "They have to catch me first," Sam said with a confidence he couldn't possibly feel. He hesitated, then leaned forward and pressed a swift, hard kiss to her lips. "Trust me, Vivian." Before she could respond, he was gone, moving silently through the trees at an angle to their previous path. Vivian huddled in the thicket, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain it would give away her position. The kiss had left her lips tingling and her mind reeling both from the unexpected tenderness and the terrible fear that it might be the last time she ever saw Sam alive. Minutes that felt like hours passed as Vivian strained to hear what was happening. Shouts in the distance, another gunshot, then silence. She held her breath, praying for some sign that Sam was safe. The sudden crack of a twig nearby made her freeze in terror. Someone was approaching her hiding place, moving slowly, deliberately. Vivian pressed herself lower into the undergrowth, trying to make herself as small as possible. A pair of boots came into view through the leaves, expensive boots, city boots, not the worn leather of Sam's practical footwear. Vivian's blood ran cold as she recognized them. She had seen those same boots countless times in Denver, often propped arrogantly on a desk or striding across plush carpets. James Forrester had found her. "I know you're here, Miss Montgomery," came his smooth, cultured voice. "There's no point in prolonging this unpleasantness. Come out now, and I give you my word no harm will come to you." Vivian remained silent, hardly daring to breathe. Forrester was here. Where was Sam? What had happened to him? "Your cowboy friend is leading my men on a merry chase," Forrester continued, as if reading her thoughts. "Quite resourceful of him, but ultimately futile. You see, while they pursue him, I found you. And soon we'll all be on our way back to Denver, where Victor is most anxious to resume your relationship." The way he said the last word made Vivian's skin crawl. She knew exactly what kind of relationship awaited her if she returned to Denver, one of control, fear, and eventual destruction of everything that made her who she was. "I'm counting to 3, Miss Montgomery," Forrester said, his tone hardening. "Then I start shooting into this thicket. 1. Vivian closed her eyes, her mind racing. She had no weapon, no means of defense. If she ran with her injured ankle, she wouldn't get far. 2. A sudden commotion erupted behind Forrester, the sound of a struggle, a grunt of pain, and then a heavy thud. Vivian peered cautiously through the leaves to see Forrester sprawled face down on the forest floor, unconscious or dead. She couldn't tell. Standing over him was a stranger, a tall man with graying hair and a silver star pinned to his vest. "Miss Montgomery?" the man called softly. "I'm Marshal Daniel Miller. Samuel Reed sent me to find you. It's safe to come out now." Vivian hesitated, uncertain whether to trust this new arrival. As if sensing her doubt, the man added, "Sam said to tell you that Providence is better than fortune. He said you'd understand." Relief flooded through Vivian. She pushed her way out of the thicket, wincing as her injured ankle protested the movement. Marshal Miller hurried to help her, his weathered face creased with concern. "Are you hurt badly?" he asked, supporting her weight easily. "Just my ankle," Vivian replied, her gaze fixed on Forrester's still form. "Is he?" "Just unconscious," Miller assured her. "Hit him with the butt of my rifle. He'll have a headache when he wakes up, but he'll live to stand trial." "Trial?" Vivian echoed in confusion. "For attempted kidnapping to start with," Miller said grimly. "And whatever other charges we can make stick once we dig into his business with Hargrove. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe." "What about Sam?" Vivian asked urgently. "And the other men?" "Sam's fine," Miller said, guiding her carefully through the trees. "He met me on the trail, that's how I knew where to find you. He's leading the other 2 on a false trail that'll eventually bring them right to my deputies waiting at Pine Creek." The marshal had a horse tethered nearby, and he helped Vivian mount before securing Forrester's hands and hoisting his unconscious form across the saddle bow. The journey to Marshal Miller's ranch passed in a blur for Vivian, her mind too full of worry for Sam and relief at her narrow escape to take much note of their surroundings. The ranch proved to be a substantial operation, a large main house, several outbuildings, and a bunkhouse for the hands. Miller explained that it served as both his actual home and an occasional safe house for witnesses in federal cases. Sam's been here a few times when things got too hot, he told Vivian as he helped her into the house. Man has a talent for finding trouble. Or for helping those in trouble, Vivian countered softly. Miller's expression softened. That too. Never seen him risk so much for someone before, though. You must be special. Vivian felt heat rise to her cheeks at the implication but was saved from responding by the arrival of Mrs. Miller, a kind-faced woman who immediately took charge of Vivian's care, tending to her injured ankle and providing fresh clothing and a hot meal. It was well after midnight when hoofbeats outside announced Sam's return. Vivian, who had been dozing in a chair by the fire despite her best efforts to stay awake, came fully alert at the sound. Mrs. Miller, who had insisted on keeping vigil with her, smiled knowingly and went to open the door. Sam entered, looking exhausted but unharmed. His gaze immediately sought and found Vivian, relief evident in his expression. You're safe, he said simply. Thanks to you and Marshal Miller, Vivian replied, her voice thick with emotion. What happened with the other men? Walked right into Daniel's trap, Sam said with a tired smile. They're cooling their heels in the Pine Creek jail along with Forrester. Judge Reynolds has been notified and is sending federal agents to transport them to Helena for questioning. And Victor? Vivian couldn't help asking, needing to know if the nightmare was truly ending. A warrant is being prepared for his arrest based on the evidence we already had plus Forrester's presence here, Sam explained, accepting the coffee Mrs. Miller pressed into his hands. It seems Hargrove made a critical error sending his partner to do his dirty work. Federal authorities have been looking for a way to connect him directly to the operations outside Denver. Vivian closed her eyes briefly, overwhelmed by the implications. So it's over? Just like that? Not entirely, Sam cautioned, moving to sit across from her. There will be statements to give, possibly testimony later. Hargrove has resources and connections. He won't go down without a fight. But you're no longer alone in this, Vivian. You have the full protection of the federal government now. And you? Vivian asked softly, searching his face. Do I have you as well? The directness of her question seemed to catch Sam off guard. He glanced toward Mrs. Miller, who tactfully murmured something about checking on her husband and withdrew from the room. When they were alone, Sam leaned forward, his expression earnest. You have me in whatever capacity you wish, Vivian. I won't pretend these past days haven't affected me deeply. Finding you on that trail wasn't just chance, it changed everything. For me as well, Vivian admitted, her heart pounding at her own boldness. I've never met anyone like you, Samuel Reed. Never known a man of such integrity and kindness. I'm just a man, Sam said quietly, with all the flaws and failings that entails. My work isn't always safe or simple. I can't offer the kind of security someone like Hargrove could, at least materially. I had material security with Victor, Vivian pointed out. What I never had was trust, or respect, or... She hesitated, then finished softly, or love. The word hung between them, potent and transformative. Sam reached across to take her hand, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. Love, he repeated, as if testing the word. I haven't allowed myself to think in those terms for a very long time. My work, my mission, they seem to preclude such possibilities. And now, Vivian prompted, hardly daring to breathe. Now I find myself reconsidering many things, Sam said, his blue eyes intent on hers, including my future. Our future, perhaps, if you're willing to consider it. Vivian's heart soared at his words. I'm more than willing, she whispered. I'm eager. Sam's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. When this is over, he promised, When Hargrove is facing justice and you're truly free, we'll talk about what comes next. All I ask is that you give me the chance to prove I'll never let you go again, not after finding you against all odds. You won't have to let me go, Vivian assured him, her voice steady despite the emotions welling within her, because I won't be going anywhere without you. In that moment, with the fire crackling beside them and the promise of tomorrow stretching ahead, Vivian knew she had found not just safety, but something far more precious, a love born of danger and kindness, of protection freely given and courage shared. Whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them together, united by the remarkable providence that had brought a collapsing woman and a compassionate cowboy together on a dusty Montana trail. The next weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Federal agents arrived to take custody of Forrester and his men, transporting them to Helena for formal charging. Vivian gave her statement to Judge Reynolds himself, who traveled to Pine Creek specifically to hear her testimony about Victor Hargrove's business practices and personal threats. Your information is invaluable, Miss Montgomery, the judge assured her after nearly 2 days of detailed questioning. Combined with the evidence Marshal Miller and Deputy Reed have gathered, we have more than enough to bring Hargrove to justice. The news that Victor had been arrested in Denver reached them a week later, delivered by a jubilant courier who had ridden through the night to bring the telegram. Sam had handed the message to Vivian, his eyes shining with quiet triumph as she read the words that signaled the end of her nightmare. "It's really over," she'd whispered, hardly daring to believe it. "It is," Sam had confirmed, drawing her into his arms for the first time since their desperate flight through the forest. "You're free." That embrace had led to their first proper kiss, not the hurried, desperate press of lips they'd shared in the forest, but a slow, tender exploration that left them both breathless and certain of their feelings. Mrs. Miller had walked in on them and retreated with a knowing smile, closing the door discreetly behind her. Now, a month after her rescue, Vivian stood on the porch of the Miller's ranch house, watching as Sam rode in from town with the weekly mail and supplies. She still marveled at how natural it felt to wait for him, to know he was coming back to her. Each day without fear was a gift she treasured. "Any news?" she called as he dismounted, noting the extra bundle of papers he carried. "Better than news," Sam replied, his smile wide as he bounded up the steps to join her. "A letter from Judge Reynolds. The federal case against Hargrove is proceeding exactly as planned. His assets have been frozen, and several of his associates have already agreed to testify against him in exchange for leniency." Vivian felt the last lingering shadow of fear dissolve at his words. So he can't use his money or influence to escape justice. "Not this time," Sam confirmed. "Reynolds believes the trial will take place this fall, and he's confident of a conviction. Multiple counts of tax evasion, fraud, intimidation, and conspiracy. Victor Hargrove won't see the outside of a prison for many years, if ever." The certainty in Sam's voice wrapped around Vivian like a protective blanket. She leaned into him, savoring his solid presence. "And what about his deputy marshal? Will he be needed for the trial?" "Not likely," Sam said, his arm tightening around her waist. "My reports and previous testimony will suffice. Judge Reynolds has actually suggested I might consider a change of assignment." Vivian looked up at him, curious. "What kind of change?" "A more permanent position in Helena," Sam explained. "Less undercover work, more coordination of field agents. It would mean a steady location, regular hours." "A normal life?" Vivian suggested, her heart quickening at the implications. "As normal as life gets in Montana territory," Sam agreed with a chuckle. "Though I admit I've grown attached to certain aspects of my current situation." "Such as?" Vivian prompted, though she already knew the answer from the warmth in his blue eyes. "Such as waking up each morning knowing you're nearby," Sam said softly. "Sharing meals and conversations. planning for a future that suddenly seems much brighter than I ever imagined possible. Vivian turned in his embrace to face him fully. I've been thinking about the future too, she admitted. Clearwater still needs a teacher, according to Mrs. Miller. The position starts in September. Clearwater is less than a day's ride from Helena, Sam noted, his expression thoughtful. Close enough for frequent visits, but not so close that your history with Hargrove would follow you there. My thoughts exactly, Vivian agreed. I could establish myself, build a reputation based on my own merits rather than as the woman who escaped Victor Hargrove. And perhaps, in time. She let the sentence trail off, suddenly shy despite the intimacy they had developed over the past weeks. Sam caught her chin gently, tilting her face up to his. In time what? He prompted, his gaze tender. Vivian gathered her courage. In time, perhaps a deputy marshal based in Helena might consider whether a schoolteacher in Clearwater would make a suitable wife. The slow, radiant smile that spread across Sam's face was answer enough, but he put it into words nonetheless. I'm considering it right now, he murmured, and finding the idea more than suitable. In fact, I can't imagine anything I want more. Truly, Vivian whispered, hardly daring to believe her fortune no, her providence. Truly, Sam confirmed, pulling her closer. I told you I'd never let you go again, Vivian Montgomery. I meant it then, and I mean it now. If you'll have me, I'll spend the rest of my days ensuring you never regret giving your heart to a simple cowboy who found you on a dusty trail. The best thing that ever happened to me was collapsing on that roadside, Vivian said with a watery laugh, tears of joy threatening to spill. Though perhaps we'll tell our children a slightly less alarming version of how we met. Our children, Sam repeated, his voice thick with emotion. I like the sound of that. Their kiss sealed the promise between them, a promise of safety, of partnership, of love that had blossomed in the most unlikely circumstances. As the Montana sun began its descent toward the distant mountains, casting long golden rays across the landscape they both had come to call home, Vivian Montgomery knew with absolute certainty that her days of running were over. She had found not just refuge but belonging in the arms of the man who had found her at her weakest moment and had never let her fall again. 5 years later, Vivian Reed stood on the porch of their home on the outskirts of Clearwater, watching as her husband rode in with their 3-year-old son, Samuel Jr., perched happily in front of him on the saddle. The boy's delighted laughter carried across the yard, bringing a smile to Vivian's face as she cradled their 6-month-old daughter, Clara, against her shoulder. "Mama, look," Sammy called as they approached. "Papa let me hold the reins all by myself. He's a natural horseman," Sam declared proudly as he dismounted and lifted their son down. "Takes after his mother." Vivian laughed at that. "I think we both know which parent he resembles in that regard. Though I'll admit I've improved considerably under your tutelage." "That you have?" Sam agreed, leaning in to kiss her softly before placing a gentle hand on Clara's downy head. "How's our little lady today?" "Just woke from her nap and eager to see her papa and brother," Vivian replied, transferring the baby to Sam's waiting arms. "How was Helena?" Sam's visits to the territorial capital had become routine over the year's monthly check-ins with Judge Reynolds, now the senior federal judge for Montana Territory, and coordination with the marshals he supervised across the region. His promotion 3 years earlier had allowed them to settle permanently in Clearwater, where Vivian had indeed become the town schoolteacher until Sammy's birth. "Productive," Sam answered, following her into the comfortable home they had built when they'd outgrown the small cottage they'd initially purchased. "Reynolds is pleased with the progress we're making against the cattle rustling operation near the Wyoming border. And he sent this for you." Sam shifted Clara in his arms to retrieve a newspaper from his saddlebag. Vivian took it, immediately noting the Denver masthead and the headline, Hargrove denied parole. Former business magnate to serve full sentence. A faint chill ran through her despite the warm spring day. Even after all these years, Victor Hargrove's name could still evoke memories of fear and desperation. But the fear had no power over her now. It was merely an echo, growing fainter with each passing year. "He'll be an old man by the time he's released," Vivian observed, setting the paper aside. "If he's released at all." "Reynolds doesn't think he'll ever see freedom again," Sam confirmed. "Too many enemies inside and outside the prison. Even if he serves his federal sentence, Colorado has charges waiting, and so does Wyoming." Vivian nodded, then deliberately turned her attention to happier matters. "Mrs. Collins invited us for dinner on Sunday after church. She's determined to have Clara betrothed to her grandson before either of them can walk." Sam laughed, the rich, warm sound filling their home as he settled into his favorite chair with the baby. "Thomas Collins is a fine boy, but our Clara will make her own choices when the time comes in about 30 years, by my calculation." "Only 30? Vivian teased, lifting Sammy onto her lap as she joined them. "I thought you'd said 40 just last week." "I'm becoming more reasonable in my old age," Sam replied with mock seriousness that made Sammy giggle. As the afternoon light filtered through the curtains Vivian had sewn herself, casting a golden glow over her family gathered in their cozy parlor, she felt the familiar wave of gratitude that often overtook her in such moments. From the brink of despair on that dusty trail to this life of love and security, the journey had been remarkable. "What are you thinking about, love?" Sam asked softly, noticing her contemplative expression. "Providence," Vivian replied, meeting his gaze across the room, the same clear blue eyes that had been her first sight when she'd awakened in his cabin all those years ago. "And how fortunate I am that you found me when I'd lost all hope." "I think we found each other," Sam corrected gently, "and I thank God every day for leading me down that particular trail at that particular moment." "As do I," Vivian agreed, her heart full to bursting with love for this man who had rescued her in more ways than he would ever know. "As do I." Later that night, with the children asleep and the house quiet around them, Sam and Vivian stood together on their back porch, gazing up at the vast canopy of stars that stretched endlessly above the Montana landscape. Sam's arm encircled her waist, drawing her close against the evening chill. "5 years," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I found you on that trail, and other times it seems like you've always been part of my life. The best part, I hope," Vivian said, turning in his embrace to face him. "The very best," Sam confirmed, his expression tender in the moonlight. "You and the children, you're everything I never dared dream of having. A family of my own. A home filled with love instead of secrets and solitude." Vivian reached up to trace the lines of his beloved face, still handsome at 33, though with a few more creases around his eyes and strands of silver beginning to appear at his temples. "No regrets about leaving the excitement of undercover work behind?" Sam caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "Not a single one. Though I'll admit life with you has provided plenty of excitement all its own." "Oh?" Vivian arched an eyebrow playfully. "Are you referring to the time Sammy decided to release all the chickens? Or when I nearly burned down the kitchen attempting to make your birthday cake?" "Both memorable occasions," Sam laughed. "But I was thinking more of the everyday miracles watching you with our children, building this life together, falling in love with you more deeply with each passing day." His words warmed her from within, as they always did. 5 years of marriage had not dimmed their passion or weakened their bond. If anything, shared joys and challenges had only strengthened the connection that had begun in the most desperate of circumstances. "I love you, Samuel Reed," Vivian said simply, rising on tiptoe to kiss him softly. "And I will never stop being grateful that you found me that day and refused to let go." "And I never will let go," Sam promised against her lips. "Not for all the days of our lives." As they stood embraced beneath the vast Montana sky, their past trials transformed into the foundation of their enduring love, Vivian knew that some journeys, however difficult their beginning, led to destinations more beautiful than one could ever imagine. Her collapse on that lonely roadside had not been an ending but a beginning, the first step on the path to the life she was always meant to live, with the man she was always meant to love. In Sam's arms, she had found not just safety but her true home. And in that knowledge, Vivian Reed found perfect peace.